This is another podcast from Alpha Business Media. Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Today, we're getting into some really interesting material you've brought together about Nepal's tourism sector.
Mm.
It looks back at, well, some past challenges, takes stock of where things are now, and outlines this pretty ambitious plan for, like, a complete refresh, moving beyond just, the famous peaks.
That's right. We're drawing from a detailed analysis that, frankly, doesn't pull any punches about why previous tourism campaigns in Nepal often fell short. And then it proposes this bold new strategy called Visit Nepal 2.0.
Okay, so our mission here is pretty clear. Understand the lessons learned, figure out the current situation, the good and the bad, and really explore this Visit Nepal 2.0 idea. The big shift, it seems, is from just chasing numbers, like sheer volume of tourists, to focusing on quality, sustainability, and, well, getting more revenue per visitor.
Exactly. It's basically recognizing that the old way wasn't sustainable, wasn't really working long term. The idea is to build something, more resilient, more valuable, using all the different things Nepal has to offer. Right, I'm ready. Let's unpack this. Because you're right, there's so much more to Nepal than just mountains. So what do these sources tell us about the history of how Nepal has tried to promote tourism?
Well, the history shows these cycles, really. Big, ambitious campaigns get launched, but often they don't actually hit their targets. And maybe more importantly, they tend to expose these deeper systemic problems in the tourism sector itself.
And the main example that comes up is the Visit Nepal 2020 campaign, VNY 2020. What was the big idea behind that one?
Oh, VNY 2020 was huge in its ambition. The stated goals were massive: attract 2 million foreign tourists in just 1 year.
2 million, wow.
Yeah, and create 1 million jobs alongside that. The slogan was lifetime experiences. They planned to spread tourism out, promoting 100 new destinations, 10 in each province. They even use symbols like the mythical Yeti to try and grab attention.
2 million in a year just sounds incredibly high, especially if there were already underlying issues.
It was. And the analysis points out that even before COVID hit, there was a lot of doubt. Critics were questioning if the targets were realistic. They talked about sloppy promotion abroad, a lack of clear marketing focus, and called the whole thing poorly planned.
So doubts even before the pandemic.
Oh, yes. Big concerns about whether the infrastructure, roads, airports, hotels could actually cope with that volume. Plus, questions about service quality and whether the money spent on promotion was actually effective. These weren't small complaints. They pointed to really fundamental weaknesses in how things were being done.
And then, of course, early 2020, the pandemic. Just a massive blow.
Absolutely devastating. The campaign basically had to be shut down by March 2020. The fallout was immediate. Mass cancellations, unemployment in the tourism sector shot up, huge financial losses everywhere.
Yeah.
There's one statistic that really captures it. International tourist arrivals in 2020 dropped by over 80% compared to 2019.
80%. That says it all, doesn't it?
About.
How fragile that model was.
It really does.
So, looking back at VNY 2020, what are the key takeaways, the big lessons highlighted in these sources?
Well, number one is probably that just chasing big numbers without making sure the basics are in place. Things like good infrastructure, decent service, effective marketing, smooth logistics. It's just, well, a recipe for failure. Volume without the underlying quality or preparation just doesn't work.
Right.
Second, there wasn't enough risk assessment, no real flexibility built in. The campaign was incredibly vulnerable to shocks from the outside, which, ironically, the pandemic proved in a very dramatic way. They needed a more adaptable approach.
And the problems with actually making it happen, the execution.
Yeah, major issues there too. Implementation, coordination, even potentially good ideas like promoting those new destinations. They didn't seem to have clear action plans or proper funding channels or smooth teamwork between government departments and the private sector. And the source makes a good point. When these big campaigns repeatedly fail or fall short, it creates this sort of fatigue, disillusionment among businesses, investors, partners. Makes it harder to get people on board next time.
So were these just VNY 2020 problems, or do they reflect a longer pattern?
Unfortunately, it seems like a pattern. These issues reflect the long-standing weaknesses in Nepal's whole approach to tourism. For years, the focus has often been on quantity, just getting more tourists in, sometimes overlooking the quality of their experience, the environmental impact, or whether they'd actually want to come back or recommend Nepal.
So the infrastructure issues weren't new either, then.
Not at all. Many previous efforts were launched, even though critical infrastructure was lacking. We're talking about the road network, often poor, making travel slow, uncomfortable, even unsafe. Air access is choked by capacity limits at Kathmandu's airport.
And the new airports aren't fully online yet?
Exactly, they exist. but they're not fully utilized or integrated. And crucially, Nepal being on the EU's air safety blacklist is a huge barrier for attracting European tourists, a key market. Even small things add up, like the lack of clean, accessible public toilets along major tourist routes. It all impacts the visitor experience.
And the classic criticism focusing too much on Everest and Annapurna.
Precisely. Over-reliance on that traditional mountain trekking and climbing. Meanwhile, the huge potential in other areas, like cultural tourism, spiritual retreats, wellness travel, other adventure sports, MIC events.
MIC, that's the conference and business travel market.
Yes, meetings, incentives, conferences, and exhibitions. All that potential has been largely untapped, undermarketed. Diversifying the product is absolutely key for any new approach.
It sounds like things are quite fragmented, lacking a clear direction overall.
That's a good way to put it. The sector has often lacked a single, coherent, long-term national strategy. Priorities tend to shift with political changes, leading to poor coordination, wasted effort on scattered, short-lived initiatives.
And the sources also mention underestimating tourism closer to home, domestic and regional.
Yes, and the pandemic really hammered that lesson home. Most campaigns focused heavily on attracting visitors from far-off, long-haul markets. So when global travel suddenly stopped, the whole industry was incredibly vulnerable.
Right.
While the source doesn't have tons of detailed stats on domestic tourism, it definitely notes that its potential to provide a buffer during crises has been consistently overlooked. Attracting more visitors from neighbors like India and China is vital. Relying only on expensive long-haul markets makes the industry too dependent on global stability, economic conditions, you name it.
Okay, so the big picture from looking back is Nepal needs to stop these one-off, often under-resourced campaigns and move towards something more systematic, long-term, and focused differently.
Absolutely. A strategic shift based on a realistic look at what's possible, what global trends are, and with a clear focus on quality, making it sustainable and ultimately more profitable.
Which leads us nicely to where things stand now in Nepal tourism today. You said there's recovery, but those underlying challenges are still very much present.
Yes, the numbers show a definite bounce back post-COVID. From around 614,000 tourists in 2022, it went up to just over 1 million in 2023, and then over 1.1 million in 2024. So that's roughly 96% of the pre-pandemic 2019 level.
Almost back to normal numbers then. Who's visiting?
The main sources are still India, the USA, and China. India leads, though arrivals dipped slightly in 2024. The U.S. saw good growth, up nearly 11%, and China showed a really significant rebound, jumping over 67% in 2024. Then you've got the U.K., Australia, Bangladesh as other important contributors.
What about the money side? How's the economics looking?
Well, the average daily spend per tourist is still quite low, hovering around $41. Total tourism revenue for the last fiscal year reported was about $548 million. Tourism is important for jobs, about 11.5% of employment, but its direct slice of the GDP pie is estimated around 1.1% for 2023.
And the peak seasons are still spring and autumn for the mountains.
Yes, that's still driven largely by the trekking and climbing seasons. But, promoting Nepal as a place you can visit year-round with different things to do is definitely part of the conversation.
Now, the sources point out this really interesting situation, almost a paradox, with hotels. A construction boom, but low occupancy.
It's quite striking. Yeah, there's been a massive expansion in hotel capacity. The number of beds available has more than doubled since 2019, and there are reportedly over 20 new five-star hotels in the pipeline.
Doubled. So, in theory, they could handle vastly more tourists than are actually coming.
Exactly. If you just look at the number of beds and the average length of stay, the theoretical capacity is enormous, potentially enough for 6 million tourists a year, maybe more.
Yeah.
But with only around 1 million actually arriving, many hotels are running at maybe just a third of their capacity.
That must be incredibly tough for the businesses themselves.
It really is. This oversupply leads to fierce competition, price wars. It drives down rates and makes it very hard for hotels to be profitable. Many are struggling financially, and paradoxically, they also face staff shortages.
Why shortages if business is slow?
Because the low revenue makes it hard to offer competitive wages. So skilled workers often look for better opportunities abroad. Plus, you have unregulated rentals like Airbnb operating outside the main tax system, which creates unfair competition for the established hotels trying to follow the rules.
But investment keeps pouring in, like that $30 million for a new 5-star.
Yeah, there's still this underlying optimism. It seems fueled partly by government incentives for large projects, and maybe a belief that demand will eventually catch up, perhaps once the new airports are fully functional. But the sources definitely warn there's a risk here. If demand doesn't materialize to meet this supply surge, you could see widespread financial distress, maybe even a bubble scenario that could impact the banks.
So infrastructure is still that fundamental bottleneck, isn't it?
You could argue it's the single biggest constraint. Air traffic is hampered by Kathmandu's airport limitations,
Hmm.
the single runway, capacity issues, and the new international airports just aren't carrying the load yet, not attracting enough airlines. Getting off that EU safety blacklist is absolutely critical for the European market.
And roads.
Still a major issue. Poor conditions, slow construction on key routes like Prithvi Highway or Noryang-Hat Muglan,
Mhm.
it makes travel between places difficult, long, unsafe sometimes. Even with great hotels or attractions, if people can't get there easily, it limits everything. And basic things like not enough clean public toilets along the way, that really detracts from the experience too.
It all adds up.
It does. That limits arrivals, how long people stay, how much they're willing to travel around and spend. It needs comprehensive, long-term investment.
And the environmental side, you mentioned garbage mountains earlier. Is that still a major concern?
Sadly, yes. That term reflects a harsh reality, especially in super popular areas like the Everest region. High numbers of tourists combined with really inadequate waste management systems mean literally hundreds of tons of garbage accumulate. Human waste at high-altitude camps is another serious problem.
They're even thinking of moving Everest Base Camp.
It's being considered partly because of the pollution and partly because the Khumbu Glacier itself is melting and becoming unstable. This environmental damage isn't just bad for nature, it severely tarnishes Nepal's image as this pristine natural destination. That's a core part of its appeal.
Especially if the goal is attracting those quality tourists who care about the environment.
Precisely. Sustainability isn't just a buzzword here, it's fundamental to competitiveness. If Nepal ignores these problems, it becomes less attractive to the very market segment it wants to court. Sustainability has to be real practice, not just a slogan.
And the final piece of the current challenge, picture regulations. The sources mentioned outdated laws.
Yeah, the main tourism law apparently dates back to 1978. It just doesn't reflect modern tourism needs. Also, tourism isn't officially designated as a top national priority sector, which can affect the level of government support, funding, and how quickly issues get resolved.
Taxes, too.
Hotels face a higher corporate tax rate, 25% compared to 20% for many other industries, and they don't get subsidies for things like electricity, which are major costs. Although there are some incentives offered for really large investments like over MPR 2 billion. And of course, political instability can always disrupt long-term planning.
Okay, so fixing these deep-rooted issues, infrastructure, environment, regulations, it's basically non-negotiable for any new strategy like Visit Nepal 2.0 to actually work.
Absolutely. They're the foundations you have to build on.
Right. Which brings us squarely to this proposed new paradigm, Visit Nepal 2.0, shifting from quantity to quality. What does that actually mean in practice?
Fundamentally, it's about changing how success is measured. Instead of just counting heads, the focus shifts to the value each tourist brings their spending, yes, but also their environmental footprint and their positive impact on local communities. It's about creating a tourism product that's high quality, sustainable, and generates higher revenue.
So quality tourism isn't just about five-star luxury.
Not necessarily, no. For Nepal, it's more about unique, authentic, maybe personalized experiences. Leveraging what makes Nepal special, its incredible nature, its deep culture, its spirituality, but delivering that with modern comfort, safety, and service standards. It requires investment not just in hotels, but in soft infrastructure too. Training guides, supporting local crafts, developing cultural programs, empowering communities.
Okay, so who is this quality tourist that Visit Nepal 2.0 is aiming for?
The strategy seems to target travelers who have more money to spend and are specifically looking for and willing to pay for unique experiences. So you're looking at affluent, independent travelers who want flexibility and high service levels. People seeking exclusive adventures, maybe deep cultural immersion, or high-end spiritual retreats. And also specialized groups, think wellness travel, scientific expeditions, photography tours, maybe even corporate MAC events.
And what kinds of premium products could cater to these groups?
The analysis suggests several key areas. Luxury adventure tourism, think high-end treks and expeditions with better lodges, maybe glamping, personal guides, gourmet food, helicopter access, high-end wellness and spiritual retreats, really tapping into Nepal's Buddhist and Hindu heritage, offering yoga, meditation, Ayurveda, and beautiful, serene locations.
Places like Dhulakal, Pokhara.
Exactly. Locations like that, which already have some high-end properties. Then there's MIC, positioning Nepal for international conferences and incentive tours, which requires top-notch facilities and logistics. High-quality cultural tourism, deep dives into arts, crafts, cuisine, maybe with expert guides or master classes, and eco-glamping or boutique nature lodges, offering comfort combined with low environmental impact.
Developing those needs different marketing too, right?
Absolutely. It requires moving beyond generic promotion to highly targeted niche marketing, working with specialized tour operators, using digital platforms effectively, creating content that speaks directly to those specific interests.
And how does focusing on these products actually increase the average spend per tourist?
Several ways. First, by offering higher value, often all-inclusive premium packages that bundle exclusive services and experiences. Second, by actively promoting add-ons, special excursions, spa treatments, cooking classes, high-quality gear rentals. Third, by encouraging visitors to buy high-quality local products, handicrafts, art, textiles, specialty foods, teas. That requires better retail infrastructure and quality assurance, of course. Makes sense. And finally, by increasing the length of stay. If you offer richer, more diverse programs, maybe combining trekking with culture or wellness, people are likely to stay longer and therefore spend more overall.
Now, sustainability is called the heart of this Visit Nepal 2.0. It's not just a side issue.
No, the way it's presented, it's absolutely central. It's a core principle that needs to run through everything: planning, infrastructure development, hotel operations, marketing messages. It means actively working to minimize negative impacts. Things like reducing emissions, using energy and water efficiently, managing waste properly, thinking about a circular economy, getting rid of single-use plastics, and actively conserving biodiversity. It also means aligning with international sustainability standards, like those from the Global Sustainable Tourism Council or the WTTC.
But isn't sustainability just an added cost for businesses?
The analysis argues strongly against that view. It positions sustainability as a major competitive advantage, especially for attracting those quality tourists we talked about. Many are environmentally conscious and actively seek out and are willing to pay more for responsible travel options.
Are there examples in Nepal already?
Yes, the source mentions places like Tiger Mountain Pokhara Lodge or the Pavilion's Himalayas as successful examples of eco-oriented, high-quality hotels. Plus, investing in sustainable technologies can lead to long-term operational savings. It builds brand loyalty, enhances reputation, and can even open up new markets or attract green investment and grants. Positioning Nepal as a leader in sustainability could be a powerful differentiator.
And tackling the existing environmental issues like the garbage problem is part of that sustainability push.
It has to be. You can't credibly market sustainable Nepal if Everest Base Camp has a garbage problem. So, the roadmap includes scaling up cleanup campaigns, establishing proper waste management systems collection, sorting, recycling, safe disposal across all tourist areas, promoting circular economy ideas, and phasing out single-use plastics. It also talks about regulating tourist numbers in very fragile areas, using science to determine carrying capacity and maybe temporary closures if needed, and educating everyone involved: tourists, locals, guides about responsible behavior.
How do local communities fit into this sustainable vision?
Community-based tourism, or CBT, is highlighted as really important.
Yeah.
The idea is to ensure that tourism benefits local people, directly providing income, jobs, a market for local products, which gives them a strong incentive to protect their local environment and preserve their unique culture.
So it's about sharing the benefits more widely.
Exactly. It can replicate successful models where tourism revenue is reinvested locally, helps empower marginalized groups like women, and supports rural development. It also offers tourists incredibly authentic experiences, getting them off the beaten track and interacting directly with local life. Government support is needed here, though: funding, training, basic infrastructure in remote CBT areas.
And cultural heritage. How is that protected in this model?
It's seen as a massive asset for attracting quality tourists. So preservation is key. This means continuing restoration work on monuments, monasteries, historic town centers, especially after earthquake damage. It also means supporting living traditions, festivals, music, dance, crafts, creating engaging museums and cultural centers, and finding ways for tourists to respectfully participate in cultural life, maybe through workshops or attending events.
There's a balance needed, though, right? Between access and preservation.
A critical balance. Too much commercialization or uncontrolled access can destroy the very thing people come to see. The Everest garbage situation is an example. But overly strict restrictions can hurt accessibility and local incomes. The key is developing sustainable management plans for all significant cultural and natural sites, defining visitor limits, ensuring tourism revenue contributes to conservation, and having clear rules for visitors.
Okay, so we have this ambitious vision quality, sustainability, profitability, Visit Nepal 2.0. How do they actually propose making this happen? What's the roadmap, the practical steps?
Well, a key point the analysis makes is that this can't be just another short-term campaign. It has to be a long-term adaptive program. Continuous improvement, monitoring results, adjusting to market changes, learning from past mistakes is crucial. They emphasize needing a permanent mechanism involving government, the private sector, communities, and experts to keep reviewing and refining the strategy.
Makes sense. So, what are the main action areas?
First up is investing in infrastructure, but specifically smart and sustainable infrastructure. So yes, finally finishing the upgrades at Kathmandu's airport, getting the new international airports like GBIA and PIA fully operational, attracting more airlines, and critically improving aviation safety to get off that EU blacklist.
Roads, too.
Definitely. Prioritizing funding for key road connections, developing comfortable and safe public transport options, improving accessibility for those community-based tourism projects in rural areas. Plus, digital infrastructure, reliable internet and tourist hubs, easy-to-use online booking systems, digital maps and apps, and basic sanitary infrastructure, clean, modern public toilets along main routes and in public areas. It sounds basic, but it matters.
Okay, infrastructure first. What else?
Second is a big bucket: reforms, regulation, and government support. Developing and passing a new, modern tourism law is seen as essential, officially declaring tourism a national priority sector to ensure it gets the focus and resources it needs. Simplifying investment procedures, maybe a truly effective single-window system, cutting bureaucracy, protecting investments.
Tax reforms.
Yes, reviewing that higher corporate tax rate for hotels, maybe offering reductions for meeting certain standards, investing in sustainability or staff training, providing targeted incentives for those priority niches like wellness, MIC, quality ecotourism, and for developing tourism in promising but underdeveloped regions. Also, mandatory classification or star ratings for hotels, and importantly, licensing requirements for all types of accommodation, including rentals like Airbnb, to ensure standards, safety, and fair competition. And enforcing building codes, especially seismic safety standards.
Right, get the house in order.
Third is a complete rethink of marketing and branding, creating a strong, compelling brand for this new Nepal that goes beyond just the roof of the world image. It needs to reflect the diversity, the spirituality, the living culture, the varied adventures, the potential for meaningful recreation. A big push to promote Nepal as a year-round destination is needed to flatten out those seasonal peaks and troughs, provide more stable employment.
And target the market.
Exactly. Highly targeted campaigns aimed at specific segments, those affluent travelers, millennials, families, corporate groups in key markets like India, China, the US, Europe, Australia, but also looking at emerging markets in Southeast Asia. Using modern digital marketing tools, working with influencers and bloggers, creating high-quality visual content, moving beyond just advertising adventure.
Fourth area.
Developing human capital. This means investing in a network of modern training centers that meet international standards, improving skills in customer service, languages, digital tools, and, crucially, the principles of sustainable tourism. Finding ways to attract and retain talented staff, better wages, career paths, improving the image of working in tourism, and specific training programs for people running homestays or guides in rural CBT areas.
And the last key area.
Fifth is focused on developing the regions and diversifying the product offer, spreading tourism benefits beyond the traditional hotspots. Specific focus is suggested for places like Karnali Province in western Nepal, which have huge potential, Rara Lake, Humla for Kailash access, Bardia National Park for wildlife, but are currently underutilized, sometimes due to inefficient budget use. The idea of creating mega destinations or tourism clusters in each province is floated to concentrate resources and create focal points for growth. And developing things like gastronomic tourism, really showcasing Nepal's diverse cuisine.
That's a massive agenda. It sounds like cooperation between the government and private businesses is absolutely essential. How do they see public-private partnerships, PPPs, working?
They're flagged as crucial, yes. But the analysis also hints that past PPPs might not have always been very effective. So there's a need for more transparent mechanisms, really clear agreements on who's responsible for what, how risks are shared, and mutual accountability. The private sector needs stable rules, investment security, and government support on the big things like infrastructure, legislation, and global marketing campaigns. Get that right, and successful PPPs could really help attract the needed investment. Cooperation with international bodies like the World Bank is also important.
Okay, so summing up this deep dive, Nepal clearly has incredible assets: nature, culture, spirituality, its people. But the past focus on just getting more tourists without fixing the fundamentals led to problems and fragility really exposed by the pandemic.
That's the core takeaway. Visit Nepal 2.0 is proposed as this fundamental shift building a tourism sector based on quality experiences, genuine sustainability, and better profitability, rather than just raw numbers.
And the three pillars holding that up are quality, sustainability, and high profitability. But making it happen requires a huge coordinated effort. Real political will, effective partnerships between public and private sectors, getting communities genuinely involved, significant investment, smarter regulations, sharp marketing, developing skilled people, and spreading the benefits across the country.
It's definitely a long-term commitment, a marathon, not a sprint. It needs constant attention and adaptation. But the potential payoff for the economy, for preserving Nepal's unique heritage, for its people, is immense.
It really is a fascinating case study, a complex challenge, but also an inspiring vision. As you, our listener, think about Nepal's incredible potential and this ambitious plan to redefine its tourism future, what single factor, in your view, do you think is the most critical for Visit Nepal 2.0 to truly succeed this time around? Is it finally fixing the infrastructure? Is it the regulatory changes? Or perhaps getting the marketing right for this new vision? Something to think about.